All right. Well, we got a couple people who are still joining in, but I just wanted to get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to, this is the sixth desk side chat here with Regpack. My name again is Connor. I'm a client success manager here, and overall, every rendition of these desk side chats, I'm going into either details about a new product release or best practices on how to use specific functionality within Regpack. And this week, I'm going to be focusing on things that are mostly have been a part of Regpack for a while now, although in Regpack Flow, there are some other ways to use it. And we're focusing on tools to manage registration once you've already actually opened for registration. So, we work with thousands of administrators and registrars all over, and we know that just because you've gotten your report of people who have signed up and paid, and you sent some confirmation emails, doesn't mean that the work is done. So the focus today, I'm going to be going over admin-only forms and products, also going into assigned admins a little bit, and then touching on comments and status tools. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and just jump into it. Usually our initial focus, when we're working with clients, is making sure that, steps to go live, right? Making sure that the forms for users to fill out, the applicants to fill out when they're registering are good to go, that your product options for people to go and select when they're signing up for your program are also ready to go. But today we're going to be going into the sort of the next steps and making sure, because sometimes when we're talking to clients, and in my experience as well, they'll either know that it exists, or they might not even know that these types of tools exist. But even if they are aware, they might not know exactly how to leverage them. So I want to make sure that we're spending some time on that today. That's going to be my focus. But before I get started on going into the details, please go ahead and start chatting questions to our Chat Me host. We'll be fielding questions throughout the time, and I'll address anything, whether it's related to this specific subject or if it's something that I haven't addressed or that you wanted to follow back up on, or something that's important to you and your organization right now. This is a great setting to go in and get those questions answered, which is why we try to do this live setting every week. So let me go ahead now and start sharing my screen. So we're back on, this is my webinar project, and we've gotten some people who have signed up for my my summer programs. Some of them are being transferred online. Some of them are scheduled for later in the summer and the fall. But let's get started on what I mean by admin-only forms and products versus just regular forms and products, because at the core, they basically work the exact same way. The difference is, like I had said before, while we have the admin only, while we have people who are trying to fill out forms, we want people to register, select the product options that you want them to have displayed. There are situations where you might need to be focusing on forms or fields that you would want to be filling out on your end to process the application, or there also might be tools that you want to need for admin only products as well. So some typical uses that we see for this type of these tools are, evaluation or approval for like a registration if you have an approval process, but also a post-program or performance review. That same kind of going through a checklist or going through an evaluation using an admin-only form. Incident reports as well. That's a really common use, to be able to add in a form to that same record, and that's where it becomes really beneficial, is that you don't have to have this in some other place. It's tied to their same registration profile. And then also, when it comes to more on the product side, being able to have space or group assignments just based on the selections, and you can use those same tools that we have in products to assign those applicants to that specific group or that specific room or that specific classroom or something like that. And then also some sort of internal process, or if it's an invite-only product or something like that. One of the common uses I'll see for an admin-only product is for like a before and after care edition. So if somebody's deciding that they need to use the before and after care for a program that's over a long period of time, having a regular basis where you add in that product. So I've seen very common use of a monthly admin only before or after care product that admins would be adding in, on a monthly basis at the end of the month. So how to enable an admin-only product or form, I'll go into that right now. And it's actually very straightforward. So when you're setting up your products, it's pretty much the same way as you normally would. I have this test product that I have, and you'll see right now it's marked admin only. The only thing that you actually need to do to make it admin only is under the settings, going into visible for users. So when I uncheck this, the applicants can't see it until it's added to their cart. So they can't see it like on the general product selection, but they are able to see it once you've added it into their cart. So if I were to check this to be on, this would just be a normal product. This is the default. If you want to make your product admin only, you just go ahead and check that off. So that's the basics of an admin only product. That part's a little bit more straightforward, and I'll get into some more of those uses as well. But the admin only forms I do want to spend a little bit more time on, because there's a couple ways to leverage that and important tools to set that up. So the products are relatively straightforward. You just turn on that setting, and for the most part, the products are pretty self-explanatory, and that you can go into adding your. One thing I do want to also, before we completely jump out of that, is you can also in Regpack Flow now add in an assigned admin or instructors. So if you have like a lead for a specific, so if you're using this to assign groups or teams, you can assign a team leader right from the product itself. So we've got our admins. You can have your admins that are added in to that team. So once you have that team leader, that way the person, if they're an admin, they can log in and see. They can just see based on the actual products that they're assigned to, instead of having to go into assign users, which I'll also show as well, because assigning admins to users is also a great tool. So now the admin only forms. So similarly, it's just a setting that you turn on. At its core, it's the exact same as a regular form. You're just changing that setting on who can view and edit it. And you're just clicking right here. So when you are under your edit the form settings, you just form settings, and it's that fourth option, admin only form. So once we turn that on, it'll display like this on our end, and the applicant can't see this form. Not only can they not fill it out, they can't actually see it. But I do want to spend a little bit of time on the actual fields themselves. So best practices when you're using this tool there's specific fields that you would prefer to have when you're filling these types of things out. So in general, avoiding using a open answer field is best practice, because you want to make sure that you have the most reportable fields that you have available to you. And you can always add new options. For example, if there's something that comes up, like if there's more information that you need to have completed that people are missing, for example, you can add an additional field. And that's still much better than having an open text box, because what happens there is these fields you're able to filter by in Regpack is much easier for your reporting. And even if you're going to download a report in Excel, yes, you can still have open text fields. So just to clarify, it's not bad to have the notes or additional information or open written text answers. But even if you are going into pulling this into Excel, it's so much easier to have where the information is uniform, and that way you'll have that. So it's easier in Regpack, as well as if you are withdrawing the data as well. So I just have an example here of an application review. So we've got my summer programs, and now I need to make sure that as an admin, I'm reviewing my applications. Before I go into, now that that's about the basics of how to set that up, I do want to just one other note on the setup part is that you have the option of whether or not you're going to trigger forms or not. So I have also an incident report form example here, which I don't have triggered automatically, because that's something that, by default, we're not expecting that there's going to be an incident report, but you can always go in and add that form later. However, the application review, for my example here, this is going to be part of my process. So I have this form set to display, same as my other forms, when the account is created. just so we're on the same page, that is just that first option, registration user account created. When that condition is met, which is anytime somebody signs up, that form will then pop in. So that way I'll be able to review the application on my end. Okay, so that's the basics of the admin-only forms and products setup, as well as how to assign admins to products. Now I'm going to go into how to use that once you've set it up. So I'll go ahead and let's go on a new example. Somebody who has, there we go. Somebody's signed up for some things, made a payment. We'll take a look at their application, and now we're going to want to go and review the application itself in this example. So this is where Regpack Flow becomes really interesting, because the admin-only forms, these existed in Regpack for quite a while, but in Regpack Flow, you're actually able to open up this form and still review their application while you're filling it out. So the side panel, this is part of Regpack Flow, something that I feel like is really beneficial and where it gets to be really useful in terms of making your process easier. So this is a basic information report. If you ever need to add information or fields onto this report, you'll just go into create new info view or settings reports, and then you'll just update that report. So the only thing you need to make sure you have done is that in the report properties, you're setting that to info view. We've got plenty of other resources on setting up reports and things like that, so I won't go into detail there, but that's the key to having, to saving you time, making it more streamlined when you're reviewing an application, is to have that info view already set up, so that way you can review the application. So for example, I'll go ahead and check off some of this information. We've got an incoming student. We say we need changes or something like that. And then I have, if it's missing information, that way it'll pop up what information is missing. If not, we can just skip that and keep it moving. So uses for the additional notes, again, these can be downloaded into report. And it is, especially in the context of specific questions or fields or information that you're gathering, that's beneficial for you. But I do also want to, let's go ahead and save this form now. It'll mark as complete now. But another use of the open text is our comments tool. So when to use comments versus when to have this in a form. And I always recommend the comments tool is really great. You can enter as many comments as you want. And we can just say application reviewed, missing information or missing waiver or something like that. When I add a comment, it's going to also include a timestamp of when I added that comment. So comments are great for when you've performed an action or made a change in the application, because what you can't do, something that's important to keep in mind, is you can't keep a record of if you're changing how you're answering a field. So if you want to have a separate record of, for example, the completed application, you'd either log that here in a comment, or you would need to have that as a separate form. So if you are making changes, that's a great way to use comments. So for your own record, for your own reference, to be able to have what changes have been made, what actions you've done, when you reached out to this person, so on and so forth. So you can always just pull it up on the side panel right here. So that's a use for comments. Also want to go into, before I completely transition into the status tool, when it comes to another thing that I haven't gone into yet, which is once we've reviewed an application, let's say we do need more information or the application is complete, what happens next? So often when you're doing a review of somebody's application, you'd want to then have some sort of follow-up action done, like an email sent out, either confirmed or denied or needs more information, that sort of thing. Or also if you are doing a where they have to be approved in order to then complete registration, to then display those additional forms or products or payment plan options that they have to complete that. So, and you can set up, and that's one of the great uses of our triggers tool. So triggers, you might be familiar, the one I had set up for that specific form. I entered yes, I needed more information, or missing information, that is, and then those follow-up fields popped up. But with your triggers, you can also set up, so based on an information that I'm submitting here, or based on, for example, a status, have it so that, you know, an email is sent out, a form is then dropped into the registration, and even you can also have an additional product that's added in. So for example, if you have like an invite only product, so like a trip or something like that, and you're reviewing that application and it's only an admin can add that in, you can set up the trigger so that it automatically is going to add in once you've submitted the appropriate approval, for example. So that can be something that you're doing within just the field itself or by a status. So I've got a couple example statuses, and that brings me to two statuses, what they are and how they work and how you can use them. At their core, and statuses, this is also a great example of if you don't need to fill out an entire form when you're reviewing an application, but you do want to take a look at somebody's information and then go ahead and approve them, or just tell them that they're missing information, for example. So when you're creating a status, typically you'll see when in Regpack, you'll have probably at least one status that archives the user. And that's something like if you have a test user or somebody who accidentally signed up twice, or if they, for example, are no longer going to be showing up and you don't need them taking up space in your report. Then those are examples of inactive archiving a user. But if you're just creating a status, at its core, that's just a label that you're setting up. You just create your name, you pick a color, you're good to go. You only check this off if you want that to archive or get rid of the record in terms of your active reporting. And so some of the examples I have for my active statuses are based on like a class that they have, based on a plan that they needed to change in their auto bill, based on if their application is approved or if they are missing information. So a status, you can use this for your reporting, but you can also use that as a condition to trigger an email or other actions like forms and products as well. So with that in mind, we do also have lots of resources on how to set up triggers on our Help Center, but I do want to just go into some examples of triggers that you can set up. So for example, you know, complete registration. So I'll go into emails and then select trigger. And then I'm going to go into the first thing it's going to prompt me to do is who am I sending this to? And for most of your cases, you'll say, I want to send this to the applicant themselves, but you do also have the option to send internally to another administrator. For example, I had that field that said needs director approval or something like that. You can have, once that's submitted, an email that's sent directly to the director. So I'll go ahead and set the recipients here. In this example, this is again the need to complete registration. So this is going to go straight to the applicant. I'll set somebody who's from. And for the from, it can be any admin, but you also have the ability to set a general project or what we call a system email. So to do that, when a system email, it doesn't have to be an actual admin. It can be like if you have a general email, you don't want it to be your direct email. Your direct email is going to be your admin account, tied to your admin account. But if you're in project settings, project settings, you can create a general email to send out your emails. And then from there, you'll go ahead and set trigger conditions. Now, the conditions here, this is basically what action needs to be performed for this to be sent out in the case of an email. So common one would be like a confirmation email would be once they've paid in full, once they've closed their balance or payments marked as approved. But in our example, we have two different options here. We could use the status tool if we want to. So the application incomplete, we just add that in and then we're done. Or I can clear this out. And then I can go back to the application review, and yes, it is missing information. And then you can actually, so once you've set that up, if you're saving that email trigger, you just hit save and then you're good to go. So that's based on, I would enter that information, and then when as soon as I hit save and I submit that form, it's going to automatically send the email out to everybody. Go ahead and delete that for now. But it also a good example of how you can leverage admin-only forms is if you do want to add in tokens, like for example, what information is missing, you can add that in to your subject on the email itself. So using what we're calling tokens here. So for example, if we go to what information needs to be completed, we could add those into that same email so they know exactly what they need to do when they log back in. So that's, I want to wrap things up, so I do want to be able to open up for questions. I've had a couple coming in so far, but just to summarize what I've talked about so far, I've talked about just general tools for mostly once you've had registration open in terms of admin-only products and forms, as well as statuses and comments and assigning admins. Something that I want to also add is you can set these up at any time during registration. What you don't want to do is delete or change fields when you're open for registration, especially on the applicant-facing side, but even on your side. But you can always add in new forms. So if, for example, you didn't have an incident report form, but hey, you want to set that up now, you can definitely go in and add that form. And that way, whenever if something happens, or if you have like a review form or something like that, you just go to add forms and it's right there for you to add in. So you can always use those at any time after you've opened registration. Just don't, if you've already filled some stuff out, don't delete those fields because that would mess with your data and your reporting. So generally, so we've got that, how to set that up. You're just editing the actual form type or the product type. And then when it comes to forms, you want to, if you can, use multiple choice, number, or date-based fields. So that way you have quantifiable reporting, and it's easier for you to filter within Regpack. So you can search by fields. So somebody, for example, who's missing information, you could actually search by that. And then when it comes to comments, definitely a great tool to use if you are performing an action or changing information, so that's where you can keep track of that and keep a record of when that happened. Statuses are great for your reporting as well. You don't have to use a status in order to trigger changes like an email or form to be sent out. You can also use the actual form field itself to set up a trigger. And then one other thing when it comes to the assigned admins, I mentioned how you can assign instructors within or team leads, for example, within the products. But assigning to an admin for a specific user, you can do as well. So this is something where if somebody is assigned to a specific group, for example, if you have multiple administrators who are reviewing applications, you can say, hey, I'm going to be reviewing this. Let me add myself in, and I'd be good to go. So with that in mind, I'll go ahead and now address some questions. So I have a question that's, I would be interested in reviewing, transferring a client from one project to another and having trouble there. So that's a great question. It's definitely not a straightforward process in Regpack right now. If you do have an applicant and they're in one project and you want them to go into another, I did touch on the example for, a few weeks back for like if you had somebody who is, you're offering a credit so that they can sign up for a different program if one of your current programs is getting restructured or canceled. And if you do have that program in another project, what you're going to want to do is first pull a report of that person's information so you have that on file as a record. So for example, this same Chris test, for example, we'll go ahead and just get a report of Chris's information, or I can just go from right here, run report. I don't have too many reports set up, but I'll just pull that basic information report, and now it's got a line item of all the relevant information for this person's information. So I can go ahead and download that, and it would be, you actually have the option of downloading it as a PDF. So if you're just copying this back into Regpack, a PDF will work. CSV or Excel spreadsheet style format is definitely better if you're massaging the data at all or making some changes or using it for a report. So you could download either way. And once you have that information, there's two things. One, if you are offering that the person just sign up for your new program, their information will be, so it depends on the project itself. Their email address, so their account information is always going to be saved. If you have gone ahead and created a project from the one that they've already signed up for, you can enable user information porting, so all of their basic information is saved over. So you won't need to keep track of all that stuff in a report and do it yourself. So they can be, depending on how your project is set up, again, it'd have to be on a case-by-case basis, understanding what the situation is. But if you had copied your project, which you, like for example, if you're setting up a new program now and I'm going into copying that project, I have the option on my copy settings to make sure that the user information is porting over. But you will need to, if they do have a credit that you're applying for them, that is a process that you'll just have to keep track of, whether you have a coupon code that you're setting up. And definitely we've got resources on how to set up a coupon code, so you can do that without having to then on your end do any work. Or that example I had of if you're pulling a report and setting this up yourself, you can just add that credit yourself by using an admin-only credit. So that way they can have the program selected, for example, and you can apply your credit. So to set up a credit, you'll just have a specific discount, or I have this different types of credits that I'm using where it's a flexible credit or it's a specific credit based on they signed up for another program, for example. So those are the ways where it's not, you can't necessarily just copy paste a user's information between projects, but their information can be ported over. And if you do have two open projects at the same time, you'll be able to actually, you'll still be able to give them some sort of discount or credit depending on how you'd like to set that up. So a question about mass refunding, if folks won't put credit towards another program. So in general, yeah, as I've covered in other chats, there's options that you can give, and if you've given those options and you don't have a way out of necessarily, refunding everybody in full, sort of that extreme side of the spectrum in your cancellation policy, that is something where you'll have to work with our payments team on. And it depends on what your situation is. If, for example, you're needing to refund a set of transactions, you would just be on your payment report. And you can, this is another great thing about Regpack Flow. If you have, if you're looking at somebody's application, you can be in the payments tab and then take a look at transactions that have gone through to sort of issue a refund. You're right here, and you're able to go through each application. You cannot refund in bulk. There are lots of reasons why that's the case, primarily because whichever processor we've set you up with, whether that's BlueSnap as this example is, or we also work with WePay, they're not going to let you just put a lump sum that's just dispersed into everybody's different account. They want to make sure for each transaction ID that's been authorized from your end. So another thing to keep in mind there, if you do have transactions that have been over 60 days, you'll need to work with our payments team on that. So whether that's a credit card or electronic check that's past 60 days old in terms of the transaction. So for example, if this was from like January, then you would need to be working with our payments team. They just need to know the transaction ID and the amount to be refunded. That's what they'll use in order to track that down with our partner. So if you do have that, if that is the scenario, go ahead and download a payment report and just make sure that those fields are added in. So payment ID, and then also if you have that amount. All right, we've got lots of good questions here. All right, I'm gonna try to, I've got a couple more. I'm gonna try to answer 2 more questions. We do try to wrap this up around the half hour, but I can definitely fit in a couple more questions right now. So to get right into it, another one that we have is, can you show us an example from a few weeks ago on how to add pricing to the sign up screen? Oh, so yeah, that was one of my first chats, so definitely good to get that refresher. And that's what we call anonymous products, or showing products on that first sign up screen. And as a teaser, by the way, we are also working on expanding that functionality in terms of being able to display specific products on specific pages. So if you have, for example, like on my products, I have the SAT prep, and I also have college essay writing. And so you could have different pages on your website and then display those specific products as well. That's something that will be coming up soon in Regpack. But for right now, you can still use fields to filter for those options on your website as well. So the only thing that you actually need to do in order to set that up that's different from a normal product selection page is that you want to make sure that, for one, your first form is an anonymous form. So that needs to be in form properties, and then you're going to make sure that it's anonymous. And what that means is that they don't need to have an active record to match with in order to see that form. And then once you have that, you'll also want to make sure in that specific form that you've added the products widget. So adding the field, and then you'll go down into, I believe it's products and orders, and then you just go into products and services, add that in, and that's what this looks like. It'll preview kind of what it looks like. Don't worry if it doesn't show all your options. This is just sort of a preview. If you want to get an accurate preview, you'll just go into the front end, either just clicking right down here, project front end, or you'll go also, you can use that in project settings. Something that you might have seen in our weekly newsletter is this functionality right here. So if you are testing out, we want to make sure you're always testing out your project. Just as an aside here, you now have the ability to, if you're signed in as an admin and you're testing out your project, you can go in and edit that specific form right here. If I were to click edit this form, it would direct me right back into that same specific form to start editing right there. So again, to recap, all you need to do is make sure that that first form has the products widget. You then make sure that that form setting is set to anonymous. And the last piece you'll need to do is in the entire registration flow, you want to go into project settings, registration, and then what the project start page is. So the default is always going to be the create account one, so logging in. But if you do have forms that are set as anonymous, and so you could also technically have more than one, it would display those options. And so just to make it simple, I've kept that program selection form as the anonymous form, and that's the one that's the first one that displays. Another question, how do I know if the project has been copied? Also not able to use their email address to the new project. It's a good question. So if your project has been, so I mean, if you had created a project from, I guess there's no necessarily like, if you already have all these projects and you aren't sure where they came from, then I guess I'd have to have a more deeper conversation. I can follow up with that, but you'll see in your copy when you're copying a project. So if I'm creating a new project, it's a copy of the project. So it'll show you when you are copying that you're copying the project. Otherwise, you would be going from a template. So most cases, if you have a project that you're using as a foundation that you're using for all your other programs, you would probably be copying that project, just to clarify how that works. And then to go into those different projects, if you already have it, you'll just be navigating to those from here. So these are our different template systems that we have. So you just be right down there and going into your projects to toggle between those. And then when it comes to the email address question, that's a great question. So if you had already used an email address in that account, it is going to give you a warning and stop you in the back end if you're going into tools and then you're creating an account. That first thing is it wants to check the email address. So if you do have somebody who's signing up it will allow you to use that account on the front end. So if you're setting this up yourself, the easiest workaround is just to go into opening that project up on the front end, go to the front end, and then you're just going to sign up using their email address. As soon as you've created the account, and in this example, it's anonymous, so it's not going to actually create the account, so we go to the next step. But as soon as you have created the account, you can do all the rest and manage the application on the back end. But if they do have that same email address and you're setting this up yourself, it will, that's correct. Currently, it's not going to let you do that in the system. It's scanning that out. And just a reminder on that while we're at it, on the user side, what will happen is that same application information is going to be saved over. So if you have an email address, what will happen is they're going to be able to log in themselves using their own credentials. So if they have an account and a password, it's going to use that account and password. So that's also something to keep in mind, is if you do have an account and password and you're using that same style registration, it's not an anonymous system, then you're going to need to make sure that they're creating that account to log in if you're using that same email address. Otherwise, you do also have the ability to request forgot password and take a look at the communications to do it yourself. But a straightforward way to do it, which is sort of what I was saying earlier as well. The best practice there would be to have them sign up. That way they can just confirm that the information that's transferred over is correct. They have their account information. And if you are providing a credit, probably an easy way to do that without having to go back and review would just be to provide them with the coupon code. So a lot of great questions. We did go a little bit over than I originally intended, but I appreciate all the questions here. I think it's definitely, that's why we want to have this series again. And of course, you know, there's always different tools that we'll have to share, and a lot of great releases that are coming up with Regpack. But definitely keep asking questions. If there's anything that was missed, I'll circle back with our other hosts to make sure we've addressed everything, and I'll be following up via email with anybody who didn't get their question answered in full. So again, next week, we'll be sending out some updates on what's going to be shared next week and discussed. I appreciate you all for joining. Again, if you do have other questions, feel free to reach out to myself or our support team, support@regpacks.com, or payments@regpacks.com. And again, always go ahead and check out our help center if there's something where you need a quick answer to your question. If you click on help, the find answer to your question now will take you directly to our help center, but you can also always just search regpacks.com/help. So hope this was helpful. Have a great weekend, everybody, and looking forward to our next week.